Thank you all for joining us on this Saturday afternoon. My name is Tracy Wahl, and this is Pastor Clay. I call him Clay Mason. Thank you for joining us.
It's good to be here. Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate it. Thank y'all for being here as well.
So Pastor Clay has a new book, which is kind of the impetus for the conversation. But I first heard about his work a few years ago through my church, Zion's Lutheran. And this book talks about the work that he's done in Trinidad. It covers the year 2018 and covers the work that he's done with the homeless here. And I just want you to kind of lay out like what you've been doing. What was the impetus to write this book?
I came here because this will be the seventh winter season that my wife and I have been here. I didn't come here to do what we are doing. I came here because I was dying. I had cancer, and I don't believe in the pharmaceutical industry. I'm not against doctors at all, but I'm not real fond of the pharmaceutical industry, and I personally believe that for every disease known to man, God has created something in nature that will take care of that. So we came here and used cannabis oil. And when I knew that was defeated, when I knew I had beat that, we had noticed some people along the way in Trinidad on the street corners and so on and so forth. That wasn't my first experience with that. I've seen it in other places, Houston, Texas, San Antonio, Austin, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but I had never really been involved in it too much. But we met an individual, and his name was Lobo, and he had fallen on hard times and was homeless, and we taught, and that started it for us. And what we started doing, we started feeding breakfast out of our travel trailer. We just decided to stay in Trinidad. We were living in Cawthorn RV Park, and I had a bit of a Facebook following prior to coming here. But Facebook for me was more a way to keep up with friends and family, because we've got friends and family all over the country. But I started making posts about that and our work and the things that we saw, the things that we experienced, the stories that we heard. And the stories, with few exceptions, are heartbreaking. We get this misconception that homelessness is a choice, that people are homeless because they've made bad choices, that people are homeless. Sound like that just went dead, but I don't need that. Can you hear me?
It's
good now? Okay, there we go. All right, it went dead for just a second. But we have this ideal, this concept that people are homeless because they're drug addicts or alcoholics or because they've made bad decisions. It's a stereotype, and what we have found to be true is anything but that. Like I said, this is our seventh season going into this. In those seasons, I have met two people that were homeless by choice. And one of them is stuck in it now and can't get out. The other gentleman went home to Texas. He was retired, and it is dead. I'm just going to set it down. I'm a preacher, and so I have a big voice. He went home to Texas. He had a house in New Braunfels, Texas, and he just came up here and lived out. He wouldn't take things from us, and he explained why. He said, "I'm here by choice. This is what I want to do with my retirement right now." And he did. He went home to Texas, and we never saw or heard from him again. But the other gentleman got stuck in it and could not get out.
So if I can just interrupt for a
Sure.
minute. You were a pastor.
Yes.
So you came to Trinidad in 2017, is that right?
17 September.
From Texas?
From Texas.
And you were a pastor?
Yes.
And you had been preaching in a church?
Yes.
But
in
this
a box.
was in a box. Say more about that. I want to hear more about that.
I was a late bloomer. I grew up in church. Let's think about this a minute. I am third generation Church of Christ. My great grandparents, he was an oil man in West Virginia at the turn of the century. And when I say the turn of the century, I'm not talking about the 21st. I'm talking about the 20th, early 1900s. And they baptized him and my great grandmother in a frozen creek in West Virginia in the middle of winter. Took an axe and broke the ice. Took an axe and broke the ice. So it's in our family. I had a grandfather on my mother's side who was a Presbyterian circuit riding ministry in Tennessee, in the Cumberland, I believe is where it was at. He went to 7 churches in 7 days on an old Tennessee mule and preached in those 7 little communities. So I grew up in church, but it wasn't until I was 1998 and I was 35 years old. I had an inkling years ago, right after I got married, to become a minister, and then I grew out of that, I guess you could say, or whatever. But at 35, I started seminary, and my wife and I and our 3 daughters moved to Lubbock, Texas, and I graduated in 2001, May of 2001. I had taken a job prior to graduation as a minister, so I've been preaching since 1999, I guess. But I've been involved in church for several years prior to that.
And so when you found yourself in Trinidad, what was it that you saw needed to be done? Like what were you called to do?
We saw people standing on the corners. Lots of people everywhere you went, and it's there's not so much of it now as there was then, as far as the people flying their signs. Anything helps. God bless you. Whatever. The numbers haven't changed so much, but what we've seen is the need for them to fly the sign. But we saw all of those signs being flown, people begging, asking for help, and it nabbed my attention, pulled it at a heartstring, I guess you would. And when we realized how great the need was, I mean, Miss Terry runs the soup kitchen. She was doing that through the week, but that left the weekends open, so they weren't getting a hot meal through the weekends. And the Zion's Lutherans did a brown bag once a month that they would go and hand out, but there's 29 other days in a month, and so we just saw, let's see what we can do. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we try. So we started cooking breakfast. And coming from Texas, my favorite breakfast is a breakfast burrito. And it's an easy meal to fix. It's nourishing. So we started cooking 2 dozen burritos a day. And I would put them in a bag and walk the river and hand them out. Or we'd drive through town and hand them out. And then it was 3 dozen burritos, and then it was 4 dozen burritos, and then it was 5 dozen burritos. And we've adjusted our numbers as the needs have changed. But we feed from those early beginnings. We feed 7 days a week. She and I do, out of a travel trailer.
Your bride, and you.
Yeah, my bride. Yeah, my bride. Let me tell you, a good woman who can find, and I did. I found one, and she has stuck to me when she should have just shot me. But she is a wonderful individual, very compassionate. She's no nonsense. She doesn't have my sense of humor. I mean, she laughs a lot, mainly at me, but she's the, what do you say, the yin to my yang, or whatever that is, And she's one of the hardest working people I've ever met. But she's one of the primary reasons why we still do this. And when I asked her if we could do this, I didn't tell her we were going to do this. I asked her. Her comment to me was, as long as I get to go see our kids and grandkids and be with them when they need us, we'll stay. And so we have. And every time they call, I send her home. She'll be going home probably she's going next week. She'll be gone for a week to take care of some grandkids that mom and dad are going on a trip. But our 7th grandchild would be born in May. And so she'll go probably towards the end of March and set up camp in Texas with our middle daughter in the last weeks of her pregnancy on our second grandchild.
So y'all get up at like 2 in the morning, right, to start cooking breakfast?
Well, not that early. Not that early. Sometimes I do, but we don't actually start cooking till around 6 o'clock. I will get up at 3. That's my quiet time. 4 o'clock in the wintertime. I go to bed early. Sun goes down. Been my experience at life. When the sun goes down, you better go to bed because otherwise I'm gonna get in trouble. So I just go on to bed. Don't get in trouble. But when you go to bed that early, you get up early, and that is my quiet time. It gives me time to reflect on the day ahead and look at the day behind me, adjust things. We start cooking. Lately, we've been started cooking about 5:30. And it takes us about an hour and a half to prepare the breakfast, and we put it in an oven, keep it in the oven to keep it warm, and then we sit on the couch for an hour and just drink coffee and vegetate, and that's our quiet time together. And then we'll leave the house about 8:20, so it puts us at the park at 9 or a little bit before, and we hand out water and breakfast and sleeping bags and tent and anything else.
And how many people are coming to breakfast now?
We are handing out breakfast. We serve 2 burritos apiece as often as we can. We're making 4 dozen right now. Around 24 to 25 people right now come to the park every morning. And it's not always the same people. If everybody came at the same time, we would probably have to double our numbers. But I'll see this person one day and I won't see them again for a couple of days. And it's kind of weird how that works. But if it was me, I'd be up every morning because I'm a chow hound.
And so what have you learned about Trinidad, the homeless here, people doing this work?
I grew up in small towns. I've always preferred to live in a small community. Trinidad is, in a lot of ways, not any different than any other place I've ever lived, other than the scenery is a whole lot prettier. I've dreamed of Colorado since I was a kid, since the first time I heard John Denver sing about it. But what have we learned is that this problem is not unique to Trinidad, but it's actually a global problem. But nationally speaking, it has reached a point of crisis, I believe. And what most middle-class Americans don't realize is they're just one disaster, one divorce, one cancer diagnosis, one car accident away from living in a tin on the river, because most middle-class Americans don't have saved up but maybe a month's worth of reserves, because we're so far in debt. Everything we buy on credit because we're told that's the way things ought to work. But then when the paycheck ends, then how are you going to keep up? And you can't. So we have learned a lot of things. Most of the people that we deal with are homeless. Well, let me back up. The number one cause for homelessness in America today is the destruction of the family. There's no safety net, so that when those disasters come, where are you going to turn? In my family, we've always been a tight-knit family. In my bride's family, they were always a tight-knit family. So if something happened, nobody fell through the cracks.
And we're talking about the extended family, too.
Extended,
Grandparents,
yeah,
grandmothers,
everybody.
aunts, uncles.
Aunts, uncles, cousins. I could call 5 dozen people. If I fell on hard times today, I could call 5 dozen people. Just on my side of the family, not counting hers. And I could go and be taken care of, and they'd pick us back up and put us back on our feet. I've actually had to call on my dad a few times because I'm not the brightest bulb on the string, and have not always made the best choices, and Dad's bailed us out a couple times in life. But most Americans today don't have that safety net because the family structure is not there. Everybody is so busy keeping up with the Joneses and paying this debt that they've accumulated that even if they wanted to help, they couldn't help because they're in the same boat. So did that answer that question? All right. I talk a lot and I chase squirrels. So if I get off track, you just slap me and put me back on. I'll get there. So
what do you think can be done?
What can be done, number one, is fire the government from the top down. Fire the government, reboot. But seriously, what can be done?
What can we do?
What can we do? We can look at each other in a new light. We have got to realize that there, but for the grace of God, go I. And in that, I'm not saying it's a simple solution because it's not, because each one of us is complicated. We have our own little quirks, our own little things, and then when you add all of the dynamics of homelessness in that equation, it makes it much more difficult even to correct the problem. But what can we do? At the very minimum is do no harm. If you're not going to do anything else, do no harm. Don't make it harder for somebody who's already helping. And don't push people down just because they are down. Are they drunks? Are they drug addicts? Are they this? Yes, they are. But you know what? There are just as many of those living in houses today in Trinidad, more so than there are living on the streets. So I'm going to give you a prime example of that. 2015, December 2015, there was an investigative reporter who had spent a lot of time researching the laws in this nation. From the top down, federal, state, and local, there are so many laws on the books today that the average American commits 3 felonies a day and doesn't even realize it. So then it's not a matter of are we all a bunch of felons, it's who did we get angry so that they would pursue us and stick us with that. So we're all guilty to some form. We need to look inward, realize who we are, and then look outward and say, if that were me, because it could be, because it is. If that were me, would I want someone to kick me, or would I want someone to give me a hand up?
Feed me a burrito.
Yeah, feed me a burrito, if nothing else. Give me some breathing room. And we are working towards that goal. I do not want to feed homelessness. I want to correct the problem. I want to fix the problem, and it is fixable. It is absolutely fixable. There are places now, from smaller communities to large metropolitan areas, that are doing things that are creating an environment that makes it conducive for recovery, that makes it conducive for people to want to improve themselves. And most people will if you just give them the chance. The problem is getting them out of the one mindset. And I hate this word re-education because it sounds like something, from Nazi days or something. But we need to re-educate people. Or sometimes just educate people. I can't tell you how many people, and there are 2 in this book. This is the first year of the ministry. That when they graduated high school, they could neither read nor write. And yet we still pushed them through the education system because they were good in football or baseball or whatever. And we wanted them in the sports program, so we just go ahead and push them through. And when they graduate, they literally could not read nor write. And one young man, somebody finally taught him how to sign his name, so that he could get some help. But it's fixable, it's doable, but it's going to take a change of heart and a change of attitude, I think, on all of us, and realizing that the problem didn't happen overnight, it's not going to go away overnight. We have got to be in for the duration, for the long haul. We live in a world of quick fixes and a world of disposal. And these are there's no such thing as a disposable person, but we treat people sometimes like they are. We've got to get out of that mindset and start seeing the value in people and then showing them their value. It's amazing. If you show someone their value and then stand back, you watch them blossom. It's amazing. I'm going to give you an excellent example of this. There's a man, I can't remember his name, but he has a company called My Pillow, and he actually has an autobiography out. I don't know if you've ever read that or heard
So now
about
I feel
that.
like we're steering into political realm.
Yeah,
I
well,
was like, I don't know what I want to talk about My Pillow.
No, but seriously though, before he was finally completely successful in that endeavor, he had been homeless for a while.
Oh, is that right?
And, I'm staying out of politics.
Yeah.
That's for somebody else. I don't
I didn't
do
realize
politics.
that.
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
He had been in the drug scene. The whole 9 yards, had been successful and married and as I recall right, divorced. He got in the drug scene, and I think all of that kind of interchanged. But he finally gave it up and became successful.
But one thing I wanted to talk a little bit more about is that, like, this book is written from a Christian point of view, and you, from my reading, your belief is that Christians have a particular responsibility to the poor.
Absolutely.
It's not just Christians, though, that have that responsibility.
Right.
But can you say a little bit more about what you believe the Christian responsibility is to the poor?
In Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, and then looking at Luke chapter 8 in the New Testament, there is this sermon that Jesus gives called the Sermon on the Mount. Luke's version is much shorter, but it also includes some things there that Matthew's gospel does not include. But the very first thing he said in Matthew chapter 5 and then in Luke chapter 6 is, "Blessed are the poor, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. For unto you belongs the kingdom of heaven." Luke goes on, Matthew doesn't record this, but a few verses down, after he gives all the blessings, he says, "But woe unto you who are rich, for you have already received your consolation." From Genesis 1 to Revelation last, there is a recurring theme, and that is God's love for his creation and the expectations that he has for his creation and the created, and that is that we are to love one another. Jesus said this, he said the two greatest commands in all of the rest of the law and prophets can be summed up in two commands. The first is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. We as Christians sometimes get wrapped up in our theology and in our doctrines and thinking that if we have all of our ducks in a row, that it's a sure shoe in into heaven. And Jesus said nothing could be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, the Jews in the Old Testament and in the early days of the New Testament thought they had all their ducks in a row, had their I's dotted and T's crossed, and Jesus came in and rebuked him. And in Matthew chapter 25, there's a passage there that gives a very detailed glimpse into what judgment will look like. Jesus said, on that day, when everything's said and done, and I separate the sheep from the goats, I'll put my goats on the left and sheep on the right, and I will look at them, and I'm going to paraphrase this. Basically what he said, hell and heaven's going to be determined on how you treated the poor among you. He said, did you feed me when I was hungry? Did you clothe me when I was naked and afraid? Did you shelter me? Did you come in and see me in prison or when I was sick and afflicted? And because as surely as you did or did not do these things for the least of these my brothers and sisters, you didn't or did not do them for me. So I don't think, and don't get me wrong, I think doctrine's important. I think it's absolutely important, but it is not the most important thing. The most important thing in a determination for our eternal destiny is going to be, how did we treat each other, especially the poor among us? And, that makes a lot of sense. Because if I fell on hard times, I would certainly want someone to help me. And so why would I not return the favor? Why would I not? And you see stories of this a lot. People paying it forward.
Do unto others
Yeah.
as you would have them do unto you.
The golden rule. And that's also in the Sermon on the Mount. That's not something somebody just made up. Jesus spoke it. So it's very important.
So what's next for your mission and for your work?
I'm not doing anything else but this until we end homelessness in Trinidad. And we're going to end homelessness in Trinidad if it's the last thing I do. Because I'm sick of seeing the pain. Pardon me. I'm sick of seeing the hurt. I'm sick. I buried 2 young men this year. Overdose of fentanyl. And why? Because they're trying to escape the reality that they are in. And if it were me, I know darn good and well that's what I'd be doing. Anything to escape the pain. I'm gonna share a couple of stories with you for why we do this and why the stereotypes are so wrong. I baptized a young woman at Purgatory River about 4 years ago. Her story, she was 8 years old the first time she had her first dose of heroin. Mother gave it to her so that she would be compliant while her mother's boyfriend, who was a Hell's Angel, and his biker buddies had their way with her. That will mess you up. When you're 8 years old and the person who should defend you with their own life is selling you out, she would videotape that as well and then sell the videotapes, the pornographic videotapes, the pedophilia videotapes, so that she could support her own habit. Now then, you want to blame mom, but here's what we found out. Misery loves company. The old saying goes, mom's just continuing a cycle that was probably perpetrated against her when she was a child. And so these things continue. In some Christian circles, they call it a generational curse. Whatever you want to call it, bad will always beget bad, will always produce bad, unless somebody stops and says, we won't do this anymore. And then things change. Another young man was 10 years old. I did not baptize him. He finally up and left. Came here with his girlfriend. They were here for a few months and then left. But he was 10 years old. I couldn't reach him. I mean, it just couldn't. I didn't have enough time to reach him, I don't guess. But he was 10 years old. Dad said, we're going camping. They went that week to buy camping supplies, a tent, a sleeping bag, all the camp stove, and we're going to go fishing and we're going to have a good time. Well, Dad was a bit of a criminal himself and had gone to a bar one night and got in a bar fight. This was in Louisiana, I believe, and killed a guy. Shoved him in the trunk of his car, drove home, took the sleeping bag that he had bought for his son, made his son help him put this body in the sleeping bag, throw it back in the trunk of the car, and took his son with him out to the country to help bury this body. Now, when you're 10 years old and you witness that with your own eyes and have to participate in that, that's going to damage you. That's going to leave you a lasting impression that will carry on through life. And so he spent most of his adult time in the penitentiary in Louisiana. And when he got out, he wanted out. He wanted out of the lifestyle, but he did not know how. And he was a raging alcoholic. And it was so bad that we would get calls in the middle of the night, can you come help me? and we'd get up at midnight and go help. You know, it's just these things. Everybody's got a story. Not everybody's story has a happy ending. We're trying to create happy endings, and we are going to do that. I say that boldly, and I don't want to brag. I don't want to come across as being arrogant. But everything I've ever set out to do in life, I have done. My dad and I, when I was a teenager, Dad said, we're going to get a pilot license. Well, we never did, but I did later. I've been a licensed pilot since 1991. I've been a fireman, volunteer fireman, and a high voltage lineman. And those three things together, my insurance agent called me in one day and laughed at me. He said, you don't make enough money to afford the premiums on what we're going to have to get life insurance for you. So I hadn't had life insurance since about 1992. I walk by faith, not by sight. And we always had a saying when I was in the fire department, God takes care of drunks and fools, and I'll tell you, I've been both. And he has taken care of me. But anything I've set my mind to, I've done. Now, sometimes I don't know. It's never a straight track. It usually looks like something like that. But we're going to get it done. And we have established a coalition of partners in Trinidad now that cover a whole gamut of the things that people need to succeed. And we are going to build a community just for them within our community that will allow them to get back on their feet. It will educate them. It will train them. And for those that can assimilate back into the culture, we will do that. And we'll pat them on the back and say, go get them and pay it forward. For those who can't. And once you've been homeless for 5 to 10 years, it becomes next to impossible to get out of the mindset that produces. But what we have found, and others have found, and others have proven, is that just because they can't assimilate back into our culture does not mean they cannot live and thrive in their own. And so we are going to build a community for them. Tiny cabins, whatever it takes. And it's amazing when you put somebody in an environment that's conducive to living, they'll take care of it. We look at the trash now, and they are trashy sometimes, more so than others, but when you put them in an environment that's conducive to growth and personal growth and longevity, when they finally get what they've never had, they tend to fiercely protect that. And it's amazing to watch. There's a gentleman down in Austin, Texas, Alan Graham, who had written a book a few years ago called Welcome Homeless, describing what they had done in Austin, Texas. And of all of the programs that I've read about across the nation, that one blows my mind. Man, you drive into this place, you would think you were driving into an upscale neighborhood. And in a lot of ways you are. But they're tiny houses and tiny cabins, and there are people walking their asphalt paved streets, and just a few months ago or a few years ago, they were living in a tent under a bridge somewhere. But they're thriving there, but they would not thrive elsewhere. So if you can thrive out here, we're going to make it where you can. If you can thrive in here, in your own community, we're going to make it where you can. I don't want to see anybody else fall through the cracks. Did I answer that question? I told you I talk a lot.
Well, on that note, I want to open it up to questions and see if anybody wants to follow up on any.
Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering what ways the mindset of kind of like the general population were essentially sort of blind to the problem. And I think a lot of, the four-walled organized religion, has become more kind of like an ingrown toenail inside those four walls. How do you change all that?
How do I what?
How do you change all that?
How do you change all that?
Because I think that's the education part of it. Also, corporations also the same problem. Will
That
they
is
help themselves?
that is the $1 million question, isn't it? How do we change the mindset that we've created? I will tell you this, and I've said this many times, and I've been people have looked at me funny. The biggest problem in the American church today is that they bought into the big lie of the American dream. The American dream is go get a job, make all the money you can so you can spend all the money you can, to surround yourself with things that will make you happy, and they never do. Jesus said it this way: do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy. There's a story in there, I believe, of a woman who had confronted me with this and was questioning why we were doing what we were doing, and she was really upset because she had surrounded herself with gold and stuff, and the sad part about it is that her treasures were doing exactly like Jesus said they would, and moth and rust, they were decaying. The house was falling down around it. It looked good on the outside, but it had cracks in the foundation, and the paint was peeling, and the cars broke down, or it's not running like it was. And so all of these things that we surround ourselves with, they're eventually going to break down. Nothing's permanent. So at the end of the day, either we spend more money maintaining things, or we decide, you know what, this isn't all it was cracked up to be. How do I change the mindset on that? I think the only way you can change the mindset on that is people have got to witness that for themselves. Some people are smart enough to figure it out on their own. I wasn't, but then maybe I kind of was a little bit. But nobody has a guarantee for their next breath. Nobody. And if that's the case, why do we spend so much time, energy, and resources trying to make ourselves happy with material things that really, at the end of the day, have no value? Can't take them with you. And if you pass them on to your grandkids, you're probably just going to create a problem for them down the road, because they didn't learn the work ethic by having to earn all this themselves. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Again, I talk a lot. Next question. Anybody else have a question? Hi, Elizabeth. How are you? Good to see you today.
What are warming center options other than Zion Lutheran?
This weekend, starting tomorrow, we have an option this year that we didn't have before. The community center. Tomorrow we are going to open the warming center. I was kind of iffy on whether we would open it tonight or not, but I've been watching the forecast. So the community center, I've been up there already. I've talked to our city manager, Steve, and then the guys that run the community center. They are ready for us. And so that is our second option, besides Zion's Lutheran. Zion's has got a funeral coming up next week, this coming week, for Sister Andrea. And so the ladies there and the men there at Zion's have spent the last week or two trying to get prepared, because it's probably going to be the biggest funeral they've ever had. Probably one of the biggest funerals in Trinidad's history, at least in recent history, I would suppose, because she was a wonderful lady. Did I answer your question?
Yes. How do you get the folks to the community center?
I carry them. We carry them. We pick them up. When we go to Zion's, the college didn't really want them walking up there. We didn't want them on the campus because there's such a diversity of young people there. And I won't lie to you and say our people aren't scared, because sometimes they are. And a lot of our folks have got mental problems that would cause them. We had one issue last year. One of our young men was whistling, catcalling at one of the young ladies, and she called in. We had to deal with him. We don't want that to happen. We want to try to keep a minimal impact on the community as possible, especially on visitors and students and so forth. So what we do is rather than have them walk, I put them in my Chevy Tahoe. My wife puts them in her car. We've got some other people in town, Pastor Jared Gallegos and his wife, the Church of Christ, Bruce and Patricia Bailey, and some other folks from time to time. We'll pick them up. Pat Hallett has hauled people up there and helped us man the center. So we carry them to the warming center and then take them back when we close it down.
Are there accommodations for those people who have pets?
This year there are. There is a lady who is trying to open a grooming center down south of town, just south of Wendy's, where the old Indian jewelry store used to be. And she has facilities there that are conducive to us being able to bring dogs and cats to that. And we've been taking some cages down there to keep them in, kennel cages, that sort of thing. There, she has some, they call them Connex boxes, these shipping containers that she has converted into her shop, and we can put the animals in there. There is a place where they can roam around. So this is the first year for that. We're excited about it because we've had a lot of people in the prior 2 years that wouldn't come to the center because they did not have we didn't have any place for their animals. And we did, Lana Geyers last year kept one of our ladies, I don't know what kind of beautiful dog, it kind of looked like a husky, Malamute, whatever, beautiful eyes. But that dog was wired for sound, big enough dog that he chewed that cage up, or she did. So, but anyway, we've got it taken care of this year, thank God. Anybody else?
Well, thank you so much for
Well,
sharing your
thank
work,
you.
and I would encourage y'all to check out this book. It's really tells an amazing story
Thank you.
of just this community. So
We've come a long way. When we first started, it was frustrating because there wasn't community support behind it. There were individuals who said, "We love what you're doing," but Trinidad's no exception to the rule. It's like that everywhere. It has been like that everywhere. It still is in a lot of places. But what I'm seeing today between the leadership in our community and the citizens of our community, and there are still some folks that are adamantly opposed to this, and that's fine. That's fine. Again, if you don't want to help, please at least do no harm. But we're going to prove them wrong.
all right, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.